Looking at our world from a theological perspective. This is the Theology Central Podcast, making theology central.
Good afternoon, everyone. It is Wednesday, March the 20th, 2024. It is currently 1:21 p.m. Central Time, and I am coming to you live from the Theology Central studio, located right here in Abilene, Texas. Now, I want you to think about this. Some of you, it may be, you may have an answer instantaneously. You may know the exact date. You may know everything about it. Others of you may go, wait, I've never done that. There's going to be lots of different answers, but I want you to think about this. All right. I want you to really think about this. When was the last time you sat down, opened a catechism, and spent considerable amount of time and in-depth study of said catechism? When was the last time you sat down, you opened a catechism, you spent time with an in-depth study of said catechism? And maybe you took notes, you looked up cross-references, you did a lot, you just really spent some time in-depth study of said catechism. When was the last time? What catechism did you use? Now, I suspect, I could be wrong, I suspect that many of you possibly have never even spent any considerable time studying a catechism. There's a high probability many of you have never even read a catechism. Now, some of you may be much more inclined to pick up a catechism, maybe using it as kind of a reference tool. Some of you may have read one at some point in your Christian life, but I think that most likely for many, the use of a catechism on a regular and consistent basis as a major part of their study, it's not utilized. And for some who even homeschool their children, they don't use a catechism and the homeschooling of their children, which is somewhat kind of baffling to me, especially if you're wanting to homeschool not just for academic reasons, but also for the ability to teach things related to your faith. You think you would definitely use a catechism because, catechisms have been a part of church history forever. I mean, church history is, in some ways you could say church history, you can kind of in some ways track church history through the pages of catechisms, right? Because each catechism will represent kind of where at least a part of Christianity was at a particular time in church history. So I think there's so much value in a catechism. So what we're going to do is we're going to be talking a little bit, just a brief kind of overview, maybe of the history of some catechisms, maybe just a brief overview, just a couple of things. And then we're going to talk, and the reason we're talking about these catechisms is because a specific catechism, one that was produced in the last, I don't know, what was it, 2017? I'll have to get the date. It was a relatively modern catechism, a very modern catechism, has now sold over 500,000 copies. A modern catechism has sold over 500,000 copies. Some of you may have never even heard of the catechism. There's a high probability many of you have never even touched it or read it. So I need to point you to it. We need to discuss it. We need to talk about, maybe we need to do some podcast episodes exploring this particular catechism. We will see. It'll just depend on people's reaction and response. But I would challenge you, if you've never taken the time to sit down with a catechism and really read it, really study it, with a notebook and a Bible and spend some considerable time, then I don't want to be harsh in my rebuke, but you're seriously lacking in your theological study. You really are. You need to do that. Pick 2 or 3 of them and spend some time really, really digging into, a catechism. And if you are homeschooling, or even if you have, children at home, catechesis is an important part of their religious upbringing. It doesn't guarantee that they're going to magically be, hey, they're going to grow up and they're going to do everything right. It's not about ensuring anything like that or making some false promise. what it's ensuring is that you're placing biblical truth inside of their head, and you can then, whatever happens, happens. But there's a catechism that has sold over 500,000 copies. So we're going to talk about that catechism. But before we do that, let's take a journey back to the past. First, let's kind of start with just a basic definition of what do we mean by catechism or catechisms. Catechisms are summaries of religious teachings, often in the form of question and answers. That's typically the way a catechism is structured. Typically, not always, but typically, in a question and answer format, right? What is the chief end of man? That's the question. The answer, to glorify God and to enjoy Him forever. Most everyone, people who don't even know catechisms, typically know that question and answer. So catechisms are summaries of religious teachings, often in the form of question and answers, which makes them perfect for memorization, obviously. They're used for instruction in the principles of a particular faith. In the history of Christianity, catechisms have played a significant role in educating believers, especially during the process of catechesis, religious instruction, for new converts or young members of the church. Here is a brief overview of the history and some notable catechisms in Christianity. And we'll go through some of these notable ones. Now, for some people, I think they sometimes see a catechism being for children. They see it as, the education of children. Maybe they'll be used in your church and maybe a Sunday school class for children, which is great. But the adults need catechesis as well. Adults need catechisms. Look, many adults are not, let's just be blunt here. Let's just be brutally honest. A lot of adults are not going to sit down and read a systematic theology. A lot of adults are not going to sit down and listen to hours and hours and hours of lectures about doctrine or theology. It's hard enough to get many Christians to participate in just listening to sermons on a regular and consistent basis. But if you can put a catechism in front of them, then in a sense, they're getting a systematic theology. They're getting doctrine. They're getting all of that in a summarized way that's relatively simple to read quickly. You can read a catechism quickly. And if they will spend any meaningful time, if they'll put forth any effort at all, that they can memorize those questions and answers. They may even add memorizing some of the scriptures to it. So it's a perfect way to instruct children, young adults, new believers, old believers. It doesn't matter where you are. It's a great tool and it should be utilized. But here's just a little history of catechisms. Let's start in the early Christian era. In the early Christian era, or in the early centuries of Christianity, catechesis was primarily oral and delivered through the teaching of the apostles and early Christian leaders. It was not necessarily written down. It was more of a spoken situation. Hey, well, we're going to ask you these questions. You're going to give us the answers, right? Kind of a question and answer. Now, also in the early Christian era, if you're going to think about catechisms, you cannot forget during this early Christian era, the creeds. The Apostles' Creed, the Nicene Creed, the creeds were basically catechesis because you can take any creed and you can turn it into a question and answer format. Right? You can take the Apostles' Creed and clearly turn that into a question and answer format, and then you can look up supporting scriptures for the answers, and I think you can kind of make your own catechism that way, and in many cases, those creeds were kind of used in a question and answer way. So do not forget the creeds. But this is very important to remember. One of the earliest known, catechism type document, right? Catechetical type document is what we would refer to as the Didache or the Didache, depending on which book you look at and who is talking to you, okay? I've heard people say the Didache, and I've heard people say the Didache. I think the Didache is, but it's spelled Didache, Didache. Every Christian on the planet should have read the Didache, should read it, should know it, should know everything about it. It's one of the earliest documents. So, I mean, if you want to really get a glimpse into early Christianity, read the Didache. You should read it. Your church should teach it. People in your church should have a copy of it. We have taught it at my church. We've gone through it once, and we've referenced it multiple times. But everyone should know that if you want to go back to an earlier and kind of a catechism type document, a catechetical type document, the Didache is like, or the Didache. I know I go back and forth in how I say it, but you should know it. All right? And sometimes we refer to it as the Didache or the teaching of the 12 apostles. It is a first century Christian manual that includes instructions on ethics, worship, and church practices. It's a fascinating document just because it takes you back. You kind of go, whoa. So this is what was kind of going on in the first century of Christianity. I think it's fascinating just from its historical significance. Everyone should know that one. Everyone should. Everyone should. Because a lot of times you read that and you hear what pastors say, well, in the early church, this, and you're like, well, what about the Didache? And many will be like, I don't know what you're referring to. Well, you're going to talk about church history. I think we need to start there, right? So everyone should know that catechism-like document. Now, it's not in a question-answer format per se, but it definitely, you definitely need it. So there's the early Christian era. Now, if we move to the Middle Ages, during the Middle Ages, catechesis became more formalized with the development of structured catechetical instruction for adults and children. The notable catechisms from the Middle Ages is the Catechism of St. Augustine and the Catechism of Pius V or Pius V. The Catechism of St. Augustine and the Catechism of Pius V. Those are the notable catechisms during the Middle Ages, the Catechism of St. Augustine and the Catechism of Pius V. Now, if you take the Didache, if you take the Catechism of Augustine and the Catechism of Pius V, and you throw in the Apostles' Creed and the Nicene Creed, maybe you could throw in the Athanasian Creed if you want. You throw in the three major creeds, throw in those catechisms, get yourself a notebook and a Bible. I mean, you're off to a theological education, a serious theological education. And guess what? You don't have to go into debt for $20,000 to get a seminary degree. Now, if some church may not hire you unless you have that seminary degree, which that to me is on them. Someone who's really studied those documents and really dug in and know that's theology, and maybe look at the history surrounding the documents and the history surrounding the times in which the documents were produced. I mean, that person's going to have a serious theological education, and everyone can do that. So now there's the early Christian era, there's the Middle Ages, now the Reformation era. The Protestant Reformation in the 16th century led to the production of numerous catechisms by reformers seeking to educate their followers on the principles of their faith. And we know the two influential catechisms from that period are what? Come on, class, if I was standing for my church, if they did not answer this question right, I would leave the church, never come back, and retire and go to a liquor store. Okay. Well, I say that there would be concern that they would get one of these wrong. Everyone should get this. Everyone should know this. What are the two influential catechisms during the Reformation era? Now, I guess you could answer this we could get into a discussion how we could answer this. Everyone should get the first one. Luther's catechism, right? Obviously. Martin Luther's, some refer to it as a small catechism. I think that's 1529. Where I don't have mine. I think it's 1529. Where is my Luther catechism? I don't know. I'm looking around. I'm looking around here. I'm looking around the studio. I think it may be at church. I have that thing. Hang on. Yeah, I think it's at church. I usually have that thing around me somewhere. I love Luther's catechism. The Luther's catechism, I think, was the first catechism I ever saw, or the first catechism I ever touched. Because when I was becoming a Lutheran, I had to go through the Luther's catechism. And I loved that thing. Loved it. Now, I don't obviously agree with his sacramental views, especially on baptism. So, but I love his catechism. So there's Luther's. That's 1529. And then, I believe it's 1541, John Calvin, I think it's called the Geneva's Catechism, or the Geneva Catechism. Geneva Catechism, and I believe that's 1541. Please, on either one of those dates, 1529 for Luther and 1541 for Calvin's catechism, please do not, don't write that in pen. Don't write that in pen. Write that in pencil, because you may have to erase it and fix it, okay? All right? Those are the two influential catechisms from that period of time. So the early Christian era, you could say the creeds, especially the Apostles and the Nicene Creed, and obviously the Didache, or you need the creeds and you need the Didache. You have to read them. You have to, it should be required. It should be required. Then the Middle Ages, the notable catechisms are the Catechism of St. Augustine and the Catechism of Pius V. Reformation era, the two notable catechisms are Luther's 1529 ? And John Calvin's Geneva Catechism ? 1541 or 1541 ? Then the post-Reformation to the modern era. All right, are you ready? Here we go. The centuries following the Reformation saw the continued development of catechisms and various Christian traditions, including Catholic, Lutheran, Reformed, Anglican, and others. Then you kind of have an explosion of catechisms, really. Now, let me tell you, we've talked about the early Christian era, the Middle Ages, and the Reformation era. We have not covered, obviously, every catechism that could have been produced in that time. We're just getting more of the notable ones. But during the post-Reformation and modern era, there was kind of an explosion. The notable catechisms from this period include the Catholic Church's Catechism on the Catholic Church, which is 1992. Now, I have right here. Oh, you should see this thing. It's beautiful. It's this beautiful white leather-bound cover, Catechism of the Catholic Church. It's beautiful. My daughter bought this for me, and it is called the Ascension Edition. The Ascension Edition. You should look up the Ascension Edition, ASCENSION, the Ascension Edition of the Catechism of the Catholic Church. The way this thing is structured, the way the color coding it has in it, this thing, if you just want to have it as a reference tool, someone makes some comment about Catholicism, then you have the Catechism to look it up and be able to verify that. You should have one. It's far better than the old copy that I used to have. But there's the Catechism of the Catholic Church and I'll never forget when it came out in 1992. When the Catholic Catechism in 1992 came out, I can't remember the name of the store. It was in Omaha, Nebraska. It was in the far, west part of Omaha. I don't remember the name of that store, but I remember purchasing my copy there because I was waiting for it to come out. All right. Then the Westminster Shorter Catechism, 1647. The Westminster Shorter Catechism is 1647. Now, what a lot of people will do, they'll say, because the Westminster Confession, or the Westminster Confession, the Westminster Shorter Catechism, because it's in the Reformed tradition. I think a lot of people, if I would have said, give me the two most influential catechisms in the Reformation era, someone would have said Luther and the Westminster, but that's not correct. Luther and Calvin and the Westminster comes in the post-Reformation modern era, because that was 1647, I believe. 1647. So some of the notable catechisms in Christianity. So that's breaking them down into era, right? We have the early, we have the Middle Ages, we have Reformation, we have post-Reformation. A list of the notable ones. With the Apostles' Creed, the Nicene Creed, the Didache, the Catechism of St. Augustine, the Small Catechism by Luther, the Heidelberg Catechism, and I believe that's 1563, the Westminster 1647 Catechism of the Catholic Church. Those are just a number of catechisms. And you should have all of them. Really, you should have. Look, Christians buy a lot of books, and a lot of those books you read once and never. catechisms are just there. You can reference them over and over and over and over and over and over. It should be like a yearly discipleship thing where you pull off like this year, I'm going to spend all year in this catechism, and all year you just that one. Don't forget the Puritan catechism. That was the catechism that we used in our church, the Puritan catechism. We made copies of it. We put it in these little binders. We taught the kids the Puritan catechism, the adults. It was Puritan catechism, and we went all in with that, all in. And I still I still very much love the fact that we did that. So the Puritan catechism, don't forget that one. Now, you're like, what's the Puritan catechism? Think of it this way. The Puritan catechism basically is the Westminster catechism, but it doesn't have the infant baptism in it. There you go. That's kind of the way to kind of look at it. I know that may be an oversimplification, but there's catechisms. Now, I turned on this microphone because there is a new catechism. In fact, it's called the New City Catechism, which has now sold 500,000 plus copies. That's a lot for a catechism, or at least in my mind, it's a lot. The article that I'm reading, they refer to it as a milestone. I think it's a pretty significant one because it's hard sometimes to find people who actually read and use catechisms in any serious, meaningful way in their Christian life. You can look over the history of their Christian life and they barely can tell you that they've read one. Like sometimes I'm baffled and confused by that. I'm like, you've been a Christian for how many years and you never read a catechism? But so many times, especially in some traditions that are not, that are in the Protestant world, they'll be like, that's a Catholic thing. And you're like, what are you talking about? How is a catechism a Catholic thing? Why do they own the term? They don't own the term catechism. That's the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard in my life. It's a summary of religious teaching in a question and answer form. Anybody can utilize it, okay? It's not a Catholic thing. But the New City Catechism has sold 500,000 copies. Are you ready? Here's a little information. Since its release in 2017, I was right. Sometimes I'm bad with dates. Well, I'm bad with all numbers, but dates definitely. So 2017, the New City Catechism was published by Crossway in partnership with the Gospel Coalition, and it has sold more than 500,000 units across the suite of formats and products. This includes the following. Here are all the things that has been produced. Are you ready? The New City Catechism, the New City Catechism Devotional, the New City Catechism for Kids, and the New City Catechism Curriculum Kit. They began to produce all kinds of materials built around the New City Catechism. 500,000. I'm quoting here. We're thrilled with how many individuals, families, and churches have benefited from the New City Catechism since its release in print, said Colin Hansen, TGC Vice President of Content and Executive Director of the Keller Center for Cultural Apologetics. Quote, for Christians, both young and old, the need for accessible catechetical resources feels especially urgent today when pervasive digital media catechize us whether we know it or not. I pray the New City Catechism continues to bear fruit for generations to come. Now, I do like that. We live in an age where digitally we're being catechized. And we're going through catechesis with all the digital content. We're bombarding our minds. We're being catechized. So why not then grab an actual catechism and then do so? Well, since 2017, the New City Catechism has obviously captured a lot of people's attentions. Now, I do have to say something. I'm going to play devil's advocate here, and I'm going to get all negative and cynical and jaded like I do. When I see that 500,000 number, on one hand, I find it impressive, but there's a part of me that says, yeah, but of that 500,000, how many of them were purchased by churches? Because as someone who's been in ministry for 23 years, I know how this works. I come up with this great idea. Oh, we're going to get 50 copies of this or 60 copies of this and we're going to give this out and everyone's going to use it. So churches can buy hundreds and hundreds, thousands of copies of something. Give them out, put it in Sunday school classrooms, do everything. And guess what the average person may do with it? If they're lucky, though, it'll go from the church to the backseat of their car and possibly make it into their house, but it may never get touched or used in any meaningful way. So much money spent by churches to put curriculum or things into the hands of people. I'm just going to be honest with you. A lot of it is you would be better to send me your money. I'll use it for something far better than it's like taking money out behind the church, putting it in a big stack and burning it. And I've watched this my whole Christian life. Starting way back as a teenager, Southern Baptist Church. We get that Sunday school quarterly, right? Had everything that you needed. And they handed it to me and I was like, oh, this is the greatest thing ever. So I went home. It was highlighted. I had notes. I had cross references. I marked that thing up. I came to Sunday school like, let's go. I'm ready to go. First, it became obvious that the Sunday school teacher, I think possibly had only looked at the curriculum, the night before, nowhere near prepared. And then it became obvious that no one in the class had even looked at it. No one in the class. And this didn't matter if I was in the teenage class or if I was in the adult class. In fact, I usually would get so frustrated, like, does anyone here even bother to read the material? Why are we spending the money on the material? And I was mean and I was a jerk and I was arrogant and there was nothing godly in how I handled it, but it frustrated me so much. They literally handed this to us. It doesn't matter. Then you can talk about my stories in when I was independent fundamental Baptist in Omaha, Nebraska. Okay, there were churches that were like, "Hey, we're going to do this for the men," and then they would get these copies of books for the men. And then the first time you meet with the men, you realize nobody even bothered to read it. But they would all argue about it. But I'm like, you didn't even, that's page 7, completely, just stop. And then I would just like, you know what? Stop spending money. So out of that 500,000, that's great. How many people it would be one thing if that 500,000 represented individuals. I mean, look, even that sometimes doesn't mean anything. I don't know how many times I've met Christian men who've bought all kinds of books. And when you start asking questions, well, I never really finished that one. I never really finished that. Well, then why did you buy the book? What's for crying out loud? Finish it, right? Okay. All right. Just drives me crazy. See, do that with pastors. You go into their office. They have all these books. Oh, I've read that one. Well, I haven't read that. Oh, I've read that. Well, I haven't read. Oh, I've read. Well, why do you got you got books in your office because you're supposed to? It's like decorations. Oh, it just drives me literally insane. So 500,000 is amazing. Have a feeling a lot of that is big purchases from churches. I could be wrong. I'm hoping I'm wrong. All right. The Catechism's 52 questions and answers were adapted by Tim Keller, Sam Shemus, from Reformation Catechisms for use at the Redeemer Presbyterian Church in New York City. In 2012, TGC partnered with Redeemer to offer the Catechism in an app and online formats. In 2017, Crossway published a print version of the Catechism as well as an accompanying devotional edited by Colin Hansen. The devotional helps readers go deeper with the doctrines and the Catechism and includes a relevant scripture reading, a short prayer, and devotional commentary written by contemporary pastors. They've got Piper, Kevin DeYoung, and historical figures such as Augustine and Martin Luther. In 2018, the New City Catechism for Kids was released, designed to teach the core doctrines of the Christian faith to children ages 4 to 11. This coincided with the release of a larger curriculum kit, a box set intended to facilitate teaching core Christian doctrines to children in a Sunday school classroom or a home school setting. All right. And then it goes on to say, perhaps no modern catechetical effort has garnered more attention and acceptance than the New City Catechism, said Justin Taylor, Crossway's executive vice president of book publishing. With 500,000 copies now in distribution, we give thanks to God. Crossway is honored to publish this suite of resources, and we pray for the Lord's continued blessing upon it for the good of the church. Taylor added that he likes how J.I. Packer, who referred to himself as a Latter-day catechist, once defined catechism, intentional, orderly instruction and the truths that Christians are called to live by, linked with equally intentionally and orderly instruction on how they are to do this. All right? So there is all the information about it. Now, here's what I want you to do. If you go to New City Catechism, all run together, newcitycatechism.com, newcitycatechism.com, you will see, well, where you can get started. You'll see the books, but guess what you'll see at the bottom? A mobile app for Apple and Android devices. newcitycatechism.com. Again, all run together. newcitycatechism.com. Now, I'm going to do this in real time. I scroll to the bottom of the page. I'm clicking on the Apple, and there it is. New City Catechism reference. I'm going to hit get. It's going to make me do my thumbprint. Okay, or my fingerprint. Okay, I did my fingerprint. Now it's downloading the catechism. I'm going to open it. I'm doing this in real time, ladies and gentlemen, in real time. Swipe right to go forward to the next question. Swipe left to go back to the previous one. All right. Tap the small down arrow at the top of the screen to see all the questions. And activate children's mode in the setting menu to show shorter answers and play accompanying music. All right, I hit done. That's my setup. Here's part one. All right, part one, God's creation. What is our only hope in life and death? So you can get the catechism for free by downloading the app. All right? There you go. You can get it for free. You can click into there's the setting. There you have everything you probably need right there. So go to New City Catechism. newcitycatechism.com. newcitycatechism.com. That's newcitycatechism.com. All run together. newcitycatechism.com. And then you can have the catechism for free. One that people have spent money to pay for. And they've sold over 500,000. Now, if you want to buy the books, if you go to newcitycatechism.com, there's the devotional. There's the devotional. And the devotional is currently, if I go to Crossway, it is, it's out of print. I wonder why. Okay, hang on. Let me go here. Okay, if you go to the Gospel Coalition, thegospelcoalition.org, thegospelcoalition.org, the New City Catechism devotional, they are currently selling it for $13. For $13. I'm going to look here. The devotional does not appear to be on the app. So if you want the devotional, hang on. I'm looking here. I'm going to go to Amazon. I'm going to type it in. I'm going to hit paste. And yes, here it is. I'm clicking on it, maybe. Here we go. The New City Catechism devotional, God's Truth for Our Hearts and Minds, the Gospel Coalition. It is available on Amazon, $12.82 on the Kindle. Hardcover is $30. Paperback is $13. So there you can have it. There's the devotional. So you can get the catechism itself on the app. Again, where do you go, everyone? newcitycatechism.com. newcitycatechism.com. That's newcitycatechism.com. And you can look at all the reference to all the tools, all the things available. And then scroll to the bottom of the page, you'll see the thing for the app. I'm going to go back. There's the app. Available for iPhone, iPad, and Android devices. The New City Catechism mobile app makes it easy to take all 52 questions and answers with you wherever you go. The free app also includes suggested scripture readings, short prayers, devotional commentary, as well as kid-friendly songs designed to help children memorize each question and answer. So there you have it. Catechisms have been a part of Christianity from the very beginning. You should be reading and utilize them. if you don't want to go back to the very beginning and you want to go somewhere a lot more modern and a lot more in this era, well, then try the New City Catechism. Over 500,000 units have been sold. Clearly, it's become very well known and accepted, so you probably should spend some time in it. Now, I think either people think, I don't know what people do with catechisms. I either say, oh, it's a Catholic thing and they don't think anything to do with it, or they just kind of look through it going, well, these questions and answers, that's so simple and almost like an arrogance to it. But I think you should, be utilizing catechisms on a somewhat regular basis. Now, every year you should. You really should. Right? At least just have one around. Wherever you do your Bible readings, just have one there, and then you can just, grab it. Spend some time in it. But what we have a tendency to do is we see a question and an answer, and we're like, okay, next. Stop. Spend some time with the question. Spend some time with the answer. Really think about it. Meditate on it. Write about it. Journal about it. Cross-reference things. Sometimes we don't want to do any digging. Right? Sometimes you got to dig if you really want to get the benefits from it. There you have it. Thank you so very much for listening. I spent 36 minutes trying to inform you about this catechism and trying to give you a little foundation of the importance of catechisms throughout church history. Hopefully this will motivate you, challenge you. Remember, right now you're supposed to be working on theonomy. That's your assignment this week. For the Sermons 2.0 app challenge. Remember the assignment, 3 sermons, 3 pro-theonomy messages, and 3 against or anti-theonomy messages. Now, someone did email me just as I was going live. Hang on, let me see here. Let me go to my email. They said a new message has been uploaded to the Sermons 2.0 app that happens to deal with theonomy. The email reads, new theonomy podcast just came out today, I believe, 2 hours long, and it is called Luke Saint versus Russell Burge, Berge. It's the Lancaster Patriot podcast by Chris Hume. The Lancaster Patriot podcast by Chris Hume. Now I'm going to open up my Sermons 2.0 app here. Where is it? I'm going to open it up. Here it is. Yeah, Luke Saint versus Russell Berger, Berger. What is justice? A friendly discussion about theonomy. The Lancaster Patriot podcast. And it appears so far 22 people have listened to it. Wednesday, March the 20th, 2024. So this is some kind of debate, discussion about theonomy. Christian debates, when I see Christians this Christian is debating this Christian and they post it online. I know everyone gets excited about them. I can't stand them because to me, watching Christians debate are about as useless as trying to teach a cow how to drive a car. It's just because nobody changes their mind. So the team that's for the theonomy side, like, oh, he destroyed that other guy. The other guy didn't even have an answer. And the anti-theonomy side will be like, oh man, he destroyed him. And it's like a bunch of men watching a football game. And it's just, I can't stand. Look, there was a time I was all into the debates. I loved them. And then you kind of begin to realize this is like a bunch of people watching a football game or a soccer match or baseball game or it's all maybe it's professional wrestling. You got your team, you got your favorite wrestler, and all right, yeah, and then you talk trash to it's like no. But you can go watch this one and see. Just because it's a part of your assignment for this week anyway. This one, maybe you'll get both sides. So maybe you could count this one as one. You could listen to 1 2-hour message and you could count it as, one for the theonomy side and one for the anti-theonomy side. So in one podcast, you could get both. So again, it's called Luke Saint versus Russell Berger. If I'm saying his name wrong, I apologize. or Berger. I would say Berger. Berger. What is Justice? A friendly discussion about theonomy from the Lancaster Patriot podcast. Anything that has patriotism, that drives me insane. That drives me. And someone's going to say, you're not a patriot? You don't love your country? Hey, you come talk to me when you served, 22 years serving your country in the United States military and you almost died. Okay. So then you can come talk to me about it. All right. I don't like patriotism mixed with my Christianity. I don't like my patriotism mixed with my theology, because I don't think theology and Christianity has anything to do with patriotism in any way, shape, or form, unless what we are being patriotic about is our heavenly city, our heavenly Jerusalem, our citizenship in heaven, not the United States of America. All right, there we go. So just to throw that in so that you're still working on that, because the numbers for our theonomy assignment were horrible. There's a lot of people not interested in it, but here's what frustrates me. It's the people not interested in theonomy who probably are the ones who will be vulnerable by being influenced by it, but they won't know what they're being influenced by because they're not interested enough to learn about it. You got to learn about these things so that you're not vulnerable to being manipulated or deceived or influenced by them. So there we go. That's why we need catechisms too, so that we're grounded in the faith. There you go. New City Catechism. Check it out. If you've used it, let me know. Get the app and we'll talk about it. Probably more, depending on your response. So email me. newsif@yahoo.com, newsif@yahoo.com. And one last thing before I go, because I'm running out of time. Someone, I think it was yesterday, maybe the day before, they donated to help support the podcast. I just want to say thank you for doing that. I don't think it was someone I'd ever heard from before. I don't think they'd ever emailed me before. So it was just like, someone new, maybe an old listener. I don't know. The name did not immediately register. So if you're an old listener and you've contacted me before, I apologize. But it's not some of the normal listeners who contact or support. So that's always good to see. So thank you so very much. And for anyone else, remember, this podcast is supported by you. And if you would like to see it continue, you can go to theologycentral.net, hit the donate tab there. Or if you're listening to us on the Sermons 2.0 app or the Church One app, just hit the give tab. And, we appreciate if it's $1 or if it's $1 million. Now, $1 million, I wouldn't know what to do. I'd be like, no. We've got to talk. A long time we would have to talk. Okay. So yeah, 100,000, I would have to 50,000. I would have to talk 40,000, 30,000. Yeah. Any large gift, I'd have to be like, wait a minute. We need to talk here. But there we go. We do appreciate that. Okay, I can't think there's anything else. The reason I'm trying to cover a lot of things really quick is because there's things are happening here that may prevent me from really doing any broadcasts, possibly. Today is Wednesday. I don't know what Thursday, Friday, or Saturday is even going to look like. Sunday will be church. Those will be uploaded so as soon as I can after. But as far as any other broadcasts, the rest of today, Thursday, Friday, and Saturday is very much up in the air about any ability to broadcast. So I'm trying to throw everything in here at the end. So I apologize for that. I like to try to keep it all focused on one thing, but I thought, we could throw these things at the end. So enough of all of that. I have to go. Everyone have a great day. Email me, newsif@yahoo.com. newsif@yahoo.com. God bless.